Imagine, if you will, that we as a congregation went up a mountain, say Mangakeke, ironically also known to some as One Tree Hill, ironic in the sense that kiekea is a vine that generally only grows in forests. Having climbed the maunga, we sit facing our teacher. Once we're all seated, Jesus begins speaking and teaching us, and then asks a question. How do you think others view your mana? How do you think others view your mana? Now, I must at this point acknowledge my struggles in understanding the meaning of mana and all its associated concepts. However, according to Margaret Mutu, it's in a traditional sense means power, authority, ownership, status, influence, dignity, respect, all derived from te atua. Additionally, my readings would also suggest that mana has, amongst other aspects, a sense of self-reliance, self-determination, and independent authority, but only in relation to the benefit of others. It also encompasses the concept of honour. Now, this is by no means a complete or comprehensive understanding, but I hope it will suffice for today. You may want to explore it a little bit more, for it's a remarkable and at times elusive concept to grasp, but it's well worth the visit. Now back to the question. How do you think others view your mana? Well, here we are, sitting around, chatting, talking. We begin to ask each other, how do we respond to a poverty of spirit? Or those in mourning? How do we regard the meek, or those who are hunger and thirst for righteousness? We begin to list the various causes we've supported, the various initiatives we have started, the many services we have held in responding to pressing social issues. Jesus nods. Encouraged, we continue to discuss how mercy and purity of heart figure in our parish life. We wonder whether we could be regarded as peacemakers. And we do begin to slow down a little when striving to recount when we've been persecuted for the sake of righteousness, or when we've been reviled and persecuted and been the butt of evil falsehoods. At this point, Jesus raises a hand. We fall silent. Yes, he says, but how do you think others view your mana? Yes. Now, there's a long-standing biblical debate as to whom Jesus taught on the mountain. Were these words addressed to everybody, or just Jesus in a circle of disciples? Many scholars, however, believe that although some of the crowd may have overheard Jesus, it does appear that Jesus is forming a circle around him of only the disciples, and he is now teaching them. Recognizing that helps us to remember two things. First of all, the possibility that these words were for the disciples only at this moment reminds us that the Beatitudes, as we've come to know them, are not entrance requirements for kingdom membership, but are instead a description of what kingdom living is like after you have received God's grace. The Beatitudes describe the character of God's kingdom, but they are not conditions of salvation. Jesus does not say, for example, only the pure in heart may enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, this is indeed good news, because the Beatitudes are impossibly hard to fulfill. Little example, given that Jesus says everyone who looks at woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Check it out, Matthew 5:28. Who could truly be pure in heart? Check that out, Matthew 5, verse 8. Remember, this is being recorded. If it were not for God's grace, no one could really be blessed. The Beatitudes are not a judgment against all who fail to measure up. Instead, they're a blessing for any who consent to join themselves into God's kingdom as it comes near. In this manner, the Beatitudes speak of a relationship with God and relationship with others. Now, some theologians have sought other ways of approaching the notion of blessed by suggesting that perhaps the word honoured could make a useful substitute. Not a bad idea. In this manner, we would say, honoured are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Honoured are the pure in heart. Honoured are the peacemakers, and so on. In this manner, the Beatitudes could be said to describe the heart of the person who is rightly related to God and thus honoured. Now, I'd like to take a little liberty here of suggesting another substitution. Mana replacing honour. Mana to those who mourn. Mana to the meek. Mana to those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. These Beatitudes then perhaps describe how a person with mana relates to other people. And as mana derives from God, then the business of relationship with God and our relationship with other people forms a complete circle. God in the centre and us struggling on the rim. Author and academic Jerome Nairi, who debunked the honour system in the Jewish daily life, it's an interesting one to read, and states that the Beatitudes show Jesus giving honour, mana, to those pushed out to the margins of their culture. Nairi believes that the 9 sayings are better understood when you first consider the last one. Honoured are you when people revile and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you on my account. In Jewish life, you were either a somebody or a nobody. If you were a somebody, then you were respected. If you were a nobody, you were reviled. Now, for those men, and they were pretty much exclusively men who gathered on the mount, they had rejected much of their Jewishness, and they were reviled for it. What is radical about the message of Jesus here at the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount is that Jesus gathers in all these people who are completely bereft and without honour in their culture's eyes, and he gives them 2 gifts which more than compensate for their very real losses. Jesus gives them honour, mana. He makes them family. They are children of one Father, and that makes them brothers and sisters. They will never be bereft in a community that sees themselves as family and that cares for one another in ways that show that they take that family relationship with utmost seriousness. Now let's just continue to unwrap a couple of the Beatitudes. I'm not going to do them all. The words hunger and thirst means less to affluent New Zealanders today than it did to people of Jesus' time. But the gospel writer here has turned them around in a way. When we were hungry, we eat. When we're thirsty, we drink. We refrigerate water to cool it and preserve our food. We shop in supermarkets and restaurants. We order food one minute and arrives the next. We are less likely to express wonder at this abundance than to express frustration when the system fails to work properly. When somebody asks if we are hungry, they only mean, are you sufficiently hungry to eat now if I put food on the table? Now, it was different in Jesus' day. The vast majority of people seldom ate meat and were often hungry, sometimes starving. Hunger and thirst, these are compelling things. A hungry person can think of little but food. A thirsty person can think of little but water. To hunger and thirst is to be totally focused. Mana to those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. There's a certain sort of compelling urgency to that. Mana to those who are totally focused on righteousness. Mana to those who hunger and thirst for a personal holiness. Mana to those who ache to live in a world where people live in right relationship. And mana to those who long for the kingdom to come on earth as it is in heaven. Mana to those who have been persecuted for righteousness. I was surprised when I started to read some of the figures of the estimates of Christians persecuted in the world today. Persecuted unto death. Some would say up to 100,000 a year are murdered because of their faith. I need to check that out a little bit more, but it's a horrific starting point. It's not as though we've been unused to that. Right from the very start, early Christians were persecuted for a variety of reasons. Jews, Saul among them, persecuted Christians as heretics. Jews and Romans accused Christians of immoral practices. The word of the Last Supper, this is my body, this is my blood, led to charges of cannibalism. The agape, love feast, and the kiss of peace led to charges of sexual immorality. Apocalyptic literature led to charges of sedition, and Christian refusal to proclaim Caesar as Lord. Well, you know the stories. That, of course, didn't stop us from doing the same kind of things as the years went on. Mana to the peacemakers. The Greek word for peace doesn't help here. The word in Aramaic, which we've come to understand, a form of Hebrew, that word is shalom. And it is to that word that we go to understand this particular beatitude. Shalom is more than the absence of strife. Shalom is the presence of harmony and sisterhood and brotherhood. Jesus pronounces blessings, not on those who avoid confrontation, but on those who make peace. The avoidance of confrontation may simply allow evil to rampage unfettered. The making of peace, however, paradoxically may involve some form of force. A Southern Baptist pastor recalls that during the civil rights upheaval in the 1960s, a member of his congregation criticised Martin Luther King for causing trouble. He said that trouble followed King, and wherever he went, proving, in fact, that King must be a troublemaker. It seemed it was difficult for him to understand that King might be a peacemaker rather than a troublemaker, and that true evil might lie in the reality of segregation. Then it is our actions that allow us to accrue mana. And Martin Luther King certainly had that in buckets loads. But even for us, even if it is only in the eyes of God, for much of what we do in honouring or giving mana to others is often done out of sight. Humbleness and meekness go hand in hand. Now there's a lot more unpacking that we could do, but I think you get the picture. I found in preparing this sermon to substitute mana for blessedness. I stopped asking some of those questions like, well, blessed are the poor? I guess it's an easy way out to say you'll inherit heaven. Certainly takes the sting off me as a wealthier person. But no, there's a lot to unpack there. And in that unpacking, I invite you to find a mana, climb it and sit. I respectfully suggest not One Tree Hill, and if you don't already have one, find a quiet one. Make it your own axis mundi. I have one. It overlooks the desert road, and if the wind is blowing in the right direction, I can only hear myself. Amen.